Okay, let me just thank this person really quick, and I'll put their comment on screen, because I was so taken back and so happy when they said this, because I was like, I didn't think, and plus they're really bad. Like, of course, like every other YouTuber, I have gotten better. I mean, I'm not saying I'm great, but I've gotten better at what I'm doing, and I was doing a whole Harry Potter series of the books versus the movies, and I think we harp on things that movies didn't do so much that I think we forget, like the things that they do really well that aren't even in the books. And especially with Half-Blood, there's a huge issue I have with Half-Blood. But then there's a couple scenes in it that I think are absolutely out of this world. I didn't think anybody gave a crap about those whatsoever. And so I'm like, oh my God, I've been meaning to, and I've gotten away from it because, like I said, I didn't think anybody cared. And I've been waiting for Omari to come back, but he keeps saying he's not camera ready, and I don't want him to be uncomfortable. So I'm totally down to talk about Half-Blood. I think that Half-Blood really screwed up as a movie, and I think it might be, it's pretty boring. It doesn't mean that I don't like it, though, and it has one of my favorite scenes in the entire series of movies. But we start out with seeing, in the movie, we see the bridge collapsing and them going into Diagon Alley and snatching up Ollivander, and how the Death Eaters are now affecting the real world. I love the scene in the book where, this is why when people make theories or say stuff, you can blatantly tell, like, obviously you didn't read it or you haven't read it recently, because they'll say stuff like, oh, well, how come the real world this or that? And it's like, no, the Minister of Magic does have contact with the Prime Minister of England and with the President of the United States and so on and so forth. And I love that when Cornelius Fudge has to go and tell the Prime Minister, like, oh no, you think that I'm going to be holding my position still? Like, no, he's back, and then he's like, Lord Voldemort, this guy that you said was gone, and I haven't had to deal with you magic folk and all this stuff, and he's complaining about the bridges falling and infrastructure and all this stuff, and he's like, yeah, that's our fault. And he's like, what? And the Prime Minister's like shocked by that, and he is introducing him to the new Minister of Magic, which is going to be Scrimgeour, which I don't understand why. I don't like that the movie didn't emphasize Scrimgeour more, because he's kind of a big deal. But I also understand that things need to be cut. Like, I just wish I would have been able to see that, but I wish they just would have acknowledged the fact that, yes, there is dialogue between the leaders of the world, of the Muggle world, and the magic world. And I love that scene in the book. And outside of Order of the Phoenix, I think that this book specifically, and in the movie they do it a little bit, but I'll get into my issue with Half-Blood in a minute. And it's not its fault. It's kind of the audience's fault, and you'll understand what I mean in a minute. But the very beginning opens with Dumbledore and Harry getting their picture taken by the Daily Prophet. They talk about how Harry is now reading the Quibbler, and he's lining Hedwig's cage with the Daily Prophet newspaper, like, because it don't mean nothing. And there's a huge amount of, and I always say this about Harry Potter, that is a huge theme in it, of political people in power using the media to manipulate things. I don't mind in the movie when Harry's riding around on trains and being reckless and stuff, because he is being reckless in Privet Drive in the book, but that whole thing with the girl in the coffee shop doesn't happen. But I don't mind that scene. But one scene that I wish they would have done, this would probably be in my top 10 scenes that I wish they would have put in, is when Dumbledore comes to talk to the Dursleys. And I've been talking about this a lot lately. I talked about it in my Final Fantasy X stuff. I really appreciate a character where being polite and being kind is a strength. And Dumbledore is like that and he really shows it in Half-Blood, especially in the book, of, I'm being polite. Like, I could take on every single one of you. I could murk every one of you without even breaking a sweat. But I'm choosing to be polite and kind no matter what, even when the Dursleys are being rude. Because in the book, Dumbledore goes to tell the Dursleys, like, you know why. And it also, the reason why I wish they would have had that in the movie is it helps explain why he had to live with the Dursleys. Because people will say, well, why didn't you just go stay with the Weasleys the whole time? Why didn't you just go stay with these people? It's because Petunia is his mother's bloodline. And as long as he's in that house, under the wizarding adult age, Voldemort cannot touch him there, because that is where his mother's blood dwells. But I love that scene in the book, because they try to be kind of rude to Dumbledore, except for Petunia. And and this is the funnest part about books, is I always took it as Petunia was super resentful of Harry, because her and her sister had this super tight relationship. Then her sister is like, we don't know what went on in that house, and is like the special one. We know in the book series that Petunia tried to communicate with Dumbledore, she knew it, Azkaban was. She knew what Dementors were. Like, she had corresponded with Dumbledore, and it, like, really takes her husband back when she gets the Howler in Order of the Phoenix. In this one, he straight tells her to her face, like, you know what the deal is, and you know that he has to stay here at least until he's considered an adult in our world, and then we can take him off your hands, essentially. But he's super polite about it, and I love when he's like, aren't you going to offer me anything to drink? Oh, no, you're not. And when he compliments, he's like, your egg, I'm sorry, I'm bad with flowers. He says, like, oh, your agamenthos or something. Oh, they've come in so lovely. And he's giving her compliments and stuff, and he's just being polite, even though they're being super rude to him. But we don't get any of that in Half-Blood. We don't hear about the staying in the house, and they do, but they don't really address it. And so yeah, and like I said, I just love that scene in the book, and it really shows. And like I said, Dumbledore is a character, and that's why I keep saying, Fantastic Beasts, are they perfect? No. Am I pissed that Johnny Depp is not Grindelwald? Yes. But Jude Law is killing it as Dumbledore. Like, Dumbledore is. I love Michael Gambon and I love Richard Harris's portrayal of Dumbledore, but I wish Richard Harris would have lived longer, because there's this fun, loving, grandpa, wacky side to Dumbledore. Polite, kind, funny. And then there's this, do not step to me, and I don't even have to get rude for you to know it. Like, you just know I'm number one in the room. And that's what he does with the Dursleys in a polite way, and I love it, and it's great. In the movie, we just get him talking to the girl, which I don't mind, and then Dumbledore sweeping him up, and then them going to get my favesies, Horace Slughorn. We also get to see Spinner's End, which to me tells me that the whole scene was Snape doing the unbreakable vow with Draco's mom. Now, in the book, I really like that. Like I said, I understand why things need to get cut, but she straight attacks Bellatrix. Like, Bellatrix tries to grab her, and she's like, don't do this. And it says, I think I have the quote wrote down. It says that she came down like a knife and burned Bellatrix, essentially, like, don't touch me. And then she says there's nothing that I wouldn't do. And later on, when, in the book, they run into Draco and his mom at Diagon Alley, even she says some pretty threatening stuff in there. And especially in this one, definitely in Goblet past, they start to definitely age up. And I always say this, some of the coldest insults, I don't think people, if you haven't read Harry Potter in a long time, they don't hold back once they start getting older. Like, I'm pretty sure that Narcissa is making straight, like, death threats at these kids in Diagon Alley. But from this very beginning, we know that she's like, I'm not playing around with you. I'm not playing around with Voldemort. It's about Draco. I'm protecting him. Like, step off. And even Bellatrix backs off. And she goes to talk to Snape, and they do the unbreakable vow. I like the way they depict it in the movie. And rest in peace, Helen McRory. You were a boss. But I really do think it shows, both in the book and the movie, how nostalgic and how much Lily has affected Snape by him even staying in that house, because he comes from a very troubled, abusive home, and why would you want to stay there, you know? And why would you want to stay in that neighborhood? I'm sure other wizards are looking at you sideways, like, why does he want to live here? You know what I mean? And I just think that's because that's where he lived when he met her. I will say that Alan Rickman in that scene, talking to Wormtail, is great, and he's like, run along, Wormtail, and he's like treating him like a little servant. I love that. That's very similar to the book, but you get more of Snape doesn't want him lurking in on their conversation. Snape is pulling some Game of Thrones shit, where he's like, no, I'm not going to let you listen in on anything, because, yeah. Oh, that's what we don't find out about either. Now, this book is where my boy shows up, Creature. Creature over Dobby all day, every day, on the block by myself. I don't care what anybody says. I love Creature. But back when Dumbledore's talking to the Dursleys, the reason they need to find out if Creature will come to Harry is to find out if he's the rightful owner of number 12 Grimmauld Place. Because if it doesn't go to Harry, it would go to the next person in the Black family, which would be Bellatrix. Now, would you want the person that's been living around the Order of the Phoenix now working for your enemy? No, he could tell them everything. So that's established in the book, and I wish they would have went into more of what Creature went through in the movies. But like I said, I understand why that was cut. But I love Creature. Find out that Buckbeak now belongs to Harry, and he's like, yeah, give him to Hagrid, and they're calling him Witherwings, and just remember that, because that comes back in the book, but not the movie, and I wish it would have been in the movie, because I truly think Snape would have killed Harry in this book or movie. Now, I love Horace Slughorn, and we'll definitely get into it more. We'll definitely get into it more with Deathly Hallows, because if you know the books, you know the last three people dueling Voldemort when they think Harry is dead is Minerva McGonagall, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Horace Slughorn. And I love Slughorn. I do. I just love him. But the movie and the book are essentially identical, and they do a very good job of it. And I do think that Daniel Radcliffe is really shining in this, acting-wise. I would say the only difference is that Slughorn pretty much already knows why Dumbledore wants him back around more than in the movie. He knows more in the book that, like, he knows exactly why Dumbledore wants him around. And he's straight up talking to Harry about it, where he's like, you know, I probably am safe around Dumbledore, or I could do this, or I could do that. And Harry is still the same way, where he's like, I don't know how much I like this guy yet. The scene is almost identical, though, and I think that's just a fun, awesome scene. So we get to the Burrow, we get to the Weasley's house, and Dumbledore's telling Harry, like, hey, no, you can tell your friends. That's important, and friendship's important, and you're allowed to tell them about this stuff, and me and you are going to be taking personal classes later on, and he thinks it's going to be dueling or something, and then ends up looking in the memories in the pensive, but he explains that all to him, and now he's going to the Burrow. I honestly think that the movie does that better. Not the Dumbledore part, but when Harry comes to the Burrow and they're all like leaning over, and you just feel back at home, and they're all like, Harry's here, and then they're like, no, I swear his owl's here, and then he's like, really, I'm here, and I love that scene, and I think it's adorable, and I love the way they do that. Here's another one that I know that they, like, obviously you can't, like, just shove it in, but it's when Hermione, they're dicking around in Fred and George's old room, and she picks up, like, a telescope and gets punched in the eye, and it's super funny, and I love that scene in the book, but Tonks is there, and I wish they would have had more of Tonks in this, but I understand, like I said, there's budgets, there's things that you have to change, adapting something's hard, so I get it, but Tonks is there throughout the book, and she doesn't have her pink hair, and then that's when we end up finding out, like, her and Remus have something going on, but Remus, all of that. But throughout it, Mrs. Weasley, Harry and them think, oh, Mrs. Weasley wants to hook her up with Bill, because Fleur, from the tournament, the Triwizard Tournament, from Beauxbaton, the French girl, now she's at the Burrow, and Ginny, Hermione, Mrs. Weasley are all like, God, we cannot stand this chick. I just wish the movie would have acknowledged that she was there, and they didn't have to have all the back and forth, but I wish they would have acknowledged that she was there, because Fleur is a very gifted witch, and she's there in Deathly Hallows and all that. So I wish they just would have mentioned the fact that she was around more, and that she is a very strong witch. In the books, in the Burrow, where it's definitely more somber, where they're still doing, like, fun activities and playing Quidditch, but throughout it, Harry's like, we keep hearing the radio saying this person's disappearing and that person's disappearing, and yada, yada, yada. And so it's definitely a way more somber feel to it. And I don't mind what they did in the movie. I don't mind how they handled it, of them just, like, hanging out and then going to Diagon Alley. And I love the scene of when we first see the joke shop. I love the scene throughout the joke shop. I think it's great. I think it's perfect. I think it's handled. Is it identical to the book? No, but it's pretty close. But that is it's just such a happy, good feeling after this somber stuff going on. I love it. And I will always say this, the sets on Harry Potter are just beautiful. Like, you see that shop and you're just like, oh my God, I'm there. And it's amazing. I love it. They're definitely starting to tell that people are more afraid to be out and about. People are staying in groups. They know that the Death Eaters are around, yada, yada, yada. So Mrs. Weasley's all weird about them splitting up, but they're like, we gotta go get robes. That's when they go to Madame Malcolm's and they run into Draco and his mom. And that's when his mom talks some mad shit. Yeah, Narcissa Straight, like, first off, Draco says something along the lines in the books of, oh, don't worry, Mom, if you smell something that stinks, it's just the mudblood that walked in, talking about Hermione, and it's like, geez. And then Narcissa Straight threatens their lives. She's like, I don't think you want to do that here. But Harry talks mad shit, and I feel like they didn't allow him to do that as much in the movies, because they wanted him to be our shining boy. But it's like, no, Ron gets into muggle duels all the time. He's punching people all the time. And you should have had that in there more. Harry pops off quite a few times, but he says something along the lines of, like, yeah, and I'll make sure you're in a cell right next to your husband and tell him I said hi. Like, Harry talks mad shit right back to Draco's mom. Like I said, we get the joke shop scene, we get Diagon Alley, half of it's shut down, it's super sad, that's very similar. They're both super similar. We get to the train ride, and you can definitely tell everything is way more serious, where the Hogwarts Express used to be this fun thing. Now there's horrors on there, and that's what I mean, like, Tonks is there, and instead of Luna being the one who finds Harry knocked out, which I think the movie does a better job with than in the book, it's Tonks who finds him. But same things happen, except they're like, wow, there's way more security, this, that, and the other thing. And there's also the Slug Club introduced, where Horace Slughorn is trying to cherry pick who he thinks will be successful or comes from a good family or will be able to get him ahead in life. And Ginny, he sees her hit someone with a crazy spell, and then he's like, oh no, I like her. And that's why it's so funny throughout it when he won't get Ron's name right, but he has Ginny in the Slug Club. So there's already a little Slug Club meeting going on the train, along with it's a much more serious tone, yada, yada, yada. And then Harry still does the same thing he does in the movie. But I love that scene with the Peruvian darkness powder when the whole train goes dark. That's such a cool shot. And Harry hides. In the book, Draco just kicks him and says, that's for my father. In the movie, he says some cold-blooded shit. Everything goes the same way. He still hits him with Petrificus Totalis, and he falls. But in the movie, he kicks him in the face, and then he says, oh yeah, your mother was dead before she could wipe the drool off your chin. And then and that was for my father, and then throws the invisibility cloak over him and says, enjoy your ride back to London. But when he says that about his mom, it's like, oh, damn. And I love Luna Lovegood, and I stand by this. Omari always says this. Luna is the most real character, and she's the realist out of all the characters. But she's the one who finds him in the movie, and I love that scene. And it's from the Rexperts that she sees. In the book, Tonks finds him, and like I said, Harry keeps thinking the death of Sirius is what's causing her to not have her colorful hair, and the truth is she's hooking up with Remus and pregnant, well, not pregnant yet, but she's all stressed, and that's why her Patronus changes, but they all think it's because of Sirius, not because of her and Lupin. She finds Harry, though, and gets him up to the gate to Hogwarts. But I do love the scene, and I think they do it very well. That's what I mean here. Like, there's things we can love from both of them, and I do love the scene with Luna and Harry fixing his nose and going up to the gate and talking to Flitwick and all that, because that doesn't happen in the book. In the book, it's Tonks gets them in, and Snape gets lippy, I think. In the book, Snape's like, oh yeah, because you want to make an entrance, and Harry tries to put his invisibility cloak on to not make a scene, but he's like, no, you're going to go in, and you're going to, not without that on, and I'm going to have you be embarrassed. We get everybody shocked from Snape being appointed as Defense Against the Dark Arts, and Harry's like, what, are you serious? And they find out that Horace Slughorn is going to be Potions Master. Throughout both the movie and the book, they do a good job of showing how Harry is becoming consumed, and he's right, and nobody's listening to him, about the Death Eater stuff with Draco. So I like that. Now, this is where I'm going to say, I think this movie suffered because I literally walked to get my diploma on the day that the final Harry Potter movie premiered. Like, I literally grew up with these actors, with this series. Like, it has a very close place in my heart. But I definitely think that, before we get into more stuff, I think that this movie suffered from, they said, okay, well, at our age, how old would I have been when this came out? Like 15, 16, having a boyfriend, girlfriend, and having a crush is a really big deal. And that is a big theme in the book. But I feel like in the movie, they were like, well, that's what the non-book readers and book readers are both about at this stage in their life, so let's focus more on that a little bit more. Even though, like I said, it is a theme in the book, it's there, but I think they said let's lean into that more in this movie because of the age demographic. And now that I'm older watching it, I'm like, man, you guys really messed up, because there's like whole ass battles you cut out. Like I said, we'll get into the Buckbeak stuff, but I definitely think that it suffers from that as a movie because you guys wanted to lean more into the who has a crush on who and stuff like that, and I feel like there's a little too much of that going on, where you could have had other stuff, which would also make it easier for the people who didn't read it to understand things like the blood pact with Petunia and things like that. I love Michael Gambon's performance as Dumbledore when he gives his speech, and he's like Tom Riddle, and he tells them the truth. He's like, you got searched, and you have a right to know why. And we all know, and the shot of showing the Aurors in front of the doors and how Hogwarts went from this fun, bright place we love to be at to like, oh no, like this is way worse than anybody thought, and I think they do a really good job with that in the movie. I don't think they do this in the movie, but Minerva McGonagall shit-talking Neville's grandma because she wants him to take a certain class, and they're essentially trying to figure out, like, oh, what special classes do I have to take to go into what profession I want? And because Snape gave Harry a crappy grade, he couldn't go on to whatever he wanted, but McGonagall's like, well, Horace Slughorn's there now, so you can take the class. And he's like, oh, and then Ron's all upset because he wanted a free period, and he's like, God damn it. And it's really similar to the movie, and I love the scene in the movie when they're just like kind of chilling, like, finally we're older, we can have a free period, and then McGonagall's like, nope, remember, we have this plan with Dumbledore happening, Harry? But in the book, they have to, like, actually go talk to her about what their classes they were going to take are going to be. And before Harry and Ron talk to her, she's talking to Neville, and he's like, well, my grandma says that Charms is a soft option. And she's like, well, why don't you tell your grandma, just because she failed Charms doesn't mean that this, that, and the other. And I always love that. And I'm like, oh my God, McGonagall's a G, man. She's such a G. But either way, she pushes them towards potions, and I love the scene when they fight over the book, because that is exactly what would have happened in school. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, we have the beat-up one, and then the nice one, and him and Ron are fighting over it. I love that. I think it's so relatable, and it is genuinely funny, and I do like that scene, and I think they do that very well. We immediately, in the movie, go into the Liquid Luck contest, and Harry's killing it, and he wins the Felix Felicis. Oh, I think we got some. Here, Voldy. We get more of Snape teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts, which I really like in the book, and nonverbal spells in all classes start to become a very important thing, so being able to do the spells without saying them out loud. I don't think they do this in the movie. It's only in the book when he's like, you don't have to call me sir, and or you don't have to call me sir, professor, or something like that, and so Snape gives him detention, but then he's like, hey, I got a class with Dumbledore that day, so he gets out of it, and throughout it, he's getting these letters from Dumbledore to come and take these classes, and he thinks it's going to be dueling or occlumency, but really it's the pensive and the memories. Here's where things really start to differentiate. So Harry goes to his first thing with Dumbledore with the pensive, and it is through a memory that somebody in the Ministry had going to the Gaunt House. Now, the Gaunt House is where Voldemort's mom lived, her brother, and their dad. There's a dead snake nailed at the door. It's real creepy, and Harry realizes in the memory they're speaking partial tongue. That's why the guy from the Ministry is not understanding them, and they're talking to each other about how Voldemort's uncle, so his mom's brother, messed up a bunch of muggles, and did whatever he wanted, but he's speaking in partial tongue to his dad, so the guy in the Ministry don't know what he's saying, and then his dad's like, yeah, shut up. This guy from the Ministry who's investigating this attack on a muggle, which was Tom Riddle, and Senior, so Voldemort's dad, he's investigating it, because you're not supposed to be doing that, and this dad, Marvolo Gaunt, is Voldemort's grandpa, ain't having it. He's like, yeah, no, you can get the hell on, you can get the fuck out of here, fuck you, what are you gonna do? I'm the bloodline of Slytherin, I'm better than you, yada, yada, yada. Who cares about dirty, filthy muggles? Not only do we get that, but we get to see how Voldemort's mother is being treated. Dumbledore has a theory that her magic was only stunted while she was in that house because of how badly she was, with the abuse that she was going through, and she, like, breaks a tea kettle or something, and this guy from the Ministry is like, I can help, and he's like, no, make her do it, she can do it, and her dad's going nuts on her and screaming at her about what a terrible witch she is, how dare she be so terrible, she's a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, this, that, and the other thing, and the guy from the Ministry is like, chill, dude, and he's like, I'm gonna mess you up if you say anything else, and I'm pretty sure they do, and then he dips out. We hear a horse and carriage going by outside, and that's when Voldemort's mom's brother, so his uncle, is like, oh yeah, that's that pretty muggle that I got. That's that pretty Tom Riddle that she's always hanging out the window after. Oh, and she's always trying to see him. And you can hear them talking smack. They're like, how come your dad doesn't get that torn down, Tom? And so there's this fancy upper-class lady and fancy Tom Riddle Sr. riding by going like, oh yeah, those are those weirdo gaunts. And they're like, oh my god, a snake on the door. And they're talking all this smack. And Voldemort's mom gets scared as hell because she's like, I have a crush on that guy, and they know it, and she's all scared. This is what her father says to her. This is what Voldemort's grandfather says to Voldemort's mom. My daughter, pure blood descendant of Salazar Slytherin, hankering after a filthy, dirt-veined muggle. Oh my god. Ruthless. I will say this, though. I do like the name Marvolo. And we get a lot of detail through these memories in the book. But in the movie, we get the orphanage flashback, which is extremely similar, almost identical. And that kid, I know he's related to Ralph Fiennes, who plays Voldemort, is great. Oh, not only did the dad dip out, but he dipped out mid-pregnancy. Now, there's theories out there, and there's a few really good ones, but the one that Dumbledore says is that he believes she was slipping Tom Riddle Sr. a love potion. And then she realized, this is wrong, I shouldn't do this to him, and stopped. And that's when he came to his senses, and he went back home to Little Hangleton. Merope sells her locket for the last amount of money she can get after her man dips, has Voldemort at the orphanage, and then dies. I think that's a very important, well, I think some other stuff is more important, but there's a lot more that goes into that. And Harry asks, should I tell my friends about this? And this also happens in the movie. And Dumbledore repeatedly tells him, yes, be open with your friends. Tell them, trust them. Because that's Dumbledore's thing. Trust, love, those are important. We also notice off rip, from the very beginning, Harry notices Dumbledore's messed up hand. He notices the messed up ring. And he notices the ring that Marvolo Gaunt, Voldemort's grandpa, is wearing in the memory. And you guys know how I feel about Quidditch, and there's so much Quidditch in this, and I hate it. I absolutely hate Quidditch. Whatever, I could have done without as much of it. And, like, Hermione helping Ron cheat during the tryouts, and that all goes the same way. Septum Sempra is the most important one that Harry learns from the Half-Blood Prince Potions book, but there's a ton of spells in there, and that's how Harry starts putting things together, like, oh, remember at the Quidditch World Cup when they were doing this, and lifting people up, like, this is really similar to that, and so then he's like, is it my dad? Whose book was this? And they're trying to figure it out, and I feel like they eased up on that in the movie, and I wish they wouldn't have. I will say that it makes me sad, because Slughorn's having parties throughout the entire book, but it does make, that scene where they're all trying to ditch him at the bar and stuff, and not talk to him, I'm like, oh my god, stop being mean to Slughorn. Now, Mundungus Fletcher he's not a huge character, but he is a big character, and I wish they would have shown him a little bit more in the movies so that we understood when he shows up in Deathly Hallows why it's important, and that's also how Aberforth gets the two-way mirror that Harry has that Sirius and James Potter used to use to communicate with each other. But in the book, like, Harry attacks Mundungus in the street, like, straight up. That's what I mean. Like, Harry, like, pops off a few times. The Katie Bell getting cursed and going into the air with the necklace and everything, that's pretty identical to the book, but I will say this, I think that the movie, because it's visual and things like that, but that scene is chilling. They're both horrifying, but the way they do it in the movie is very, very well done. A scene that isn't in the movie, when Minerva tells them, how come it's always you three? And Ron's like, I've been asking myself that this whole time, Professor. I don't know. And I love that, and it's great, and it's hilarious, and that's not in the book. I love that scene. We go into a few more memories, and one of them is when Tom Riddle's a little bit older in the orphanage, and that's when Harry's like, oh, he definitely got his father's good looks, and yada, 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 and Dumbledore convinces him he's not a doctor, and this, that, and like I said, it's very similar to the movie. It's just there's more memories that we see in the book. And once again, Voldemort, even as a child, is still a little more ruthless than he even is, and that kid does a great job of playing creepy, scary kid who's pretty confident, and even they say that in the book, they're like, it was almost like he was giving a command, like, and this is like little kid. In the movie, we go right into, like, let's get the Slughorn memory. We immediately get shown the Slughorn memory, where it takes a while in the book to get to that part. See the differences between, like, when Harry was told you're going to Hogwarts and he got help from Hagrid, like, Dumbledore offers to help Tom Riddle, and Tom Riddle's like, no, I can do it on my own. I got this on my own. And Dumbledore says, from day one, I knew he wanted to be different. He wanted to be notorious. Like I said, this is a big, huge theme of, like, Harry falling for Ginny, and I think the book does this so well. And they take so much away from her in the, like I said, this movie focuses so much on, like, people having crushes and stuff, that I'm like, how did you do this to Ginny? How did you do her so dirty? Because, come on now. But the way it's wrote and described of how you really feel when you're like, I can't be mad that they're with that other person, but I want to be with them, is perfectly described in the book. And there is a great scene in the book where Ginny straight is like, I'm gonna have a talk with my brother after Ron walks in on her, like, kissing Dean or something, and she's like, oh no, me and my dear brother are gonna talk, and she lets him have it. In the movie, we get just Harry and Ron talking in bed, and which is also relatable, and I like that, but like I said, I think they were really trying to, like, go, oh, like, 14, 15, 16-year-olds are watching this, so that's what's important to them, so we'll cut some of this stuff and leave more of this in. But I'm like, then how did you do Ginny so dirty? You know what I mean? But the scene where she shows up to the Slughorn dinner late, and Hermione's like, oh, she's been crying, her and Dean have been fighting again, and Harry kind of gets, like, a little geeked up, or, like, I like that Harry stands up like a gentleman, and it's like, oh my god, to, like, he wants to comfort her, and that's not a part of the book. And I love that scene between them. But then, like I said, you guys did Ginny so dirty. I love that they show Luna's hat, because I don't think Luna's involved with when, like I said, I hate Quidditch, when they pretend to put the Felix Felicis in Ron's drink. But she is wearing her giant Gryffindor hat at the stadium to help cheer them on. Now, the whole Gryffindor party after is almost the exact same in the book, except Ron and Lavender kiss. And the scene of, you know that Hermione's already been practicing with the birds earlier on, but it's not the same as in the movie. But I love that scene between Harry and Hermione as platonic friends sitting together when Lavender and Ron come running in, and then she sends the birds at him, and her and Harry are talking, and she's like, "You're my best friend, Harry. I know how you feel about her." And he goes, "It feels like this." And that's such a great scene. We finally get Harry to go to a Slug Club party during Christmas time, and he takes Luna, and Hermione's all mad because she was trying to make Ron jealous, so she brought McLaggen, and I think that is all genuinely funny, and they do a really good job with that. I love that scene. In the book, there's just a little more detail of, like, Luna being like, that guy, and, like, doing her conspiracy theories, which is hilarious and great, and I love it. That's another thing I wish they would have done throughout this entire movie series is, like, Harry and Hermione, like, they don't hold back with each other just because one's a boy and one's a girl. Like, he tells her, he's like, "You really did that? Like, you are an ass for doing that, Hermione." And she's like, "Man, come on." Like, and they give each other more flack. Like, because you should be able to tell your friend when they're messing up. If you can't, then are they really your friend? In the movie, they have Snape come up to Harry and tell him that Dumbledore's been traveling abroad and to wish him a happy holiday. In the book, Snape realizes Harry has my old potions book, because Slughorn's like, "Oh, you should see the potion he made and this and that. He must have his mother's gift." Also another nod to, why do you think Snape went into potions so hard? Because Lily was good at it. And I always really liked that and thought that was super sweet. But Harry and Slughorn and Snape are talking, and Snape's like, "Oh, really? Really? And you can tell that he doesn't know exactly, but he knows something's up, and maybe that's a possibility. Everything is pretty much the same with the Slughorn party after that, with, like, Draco getting caught, him saying he was gate crashing, all that. Harry follows, he hears about the unbreakable vow, and then we go to the Burrow. We get that really super awkward scene at the Burrow in the movie with Ginny feeding Harry, and I don't know, tying shoe. When does she tie his shoe? That shit's weird. I don't know. Like I said, you guys did Ginny dirty, but we go to the Burrow for Christmas. Now, I liked the way they handled this. Us seeing the Burrow burn down, and for it to go into almost like a horror film feeling, none of that happens in the book. I feel like because they didn't show Scrimgeour enough prior, they only showed him, like, do a speech in the beginning, that they couldn't do this, because I think the audience would have went, "Who the hell is this?" But the Minister of Magic shows up, and he's like, "Harry, will you come be our little mascot?" And Harry's like, "No, because," and this is what I tell people all the time, he says this, he's like, "If they see me coming in and out of the ministry and agreeing with what you're doing, then it seems like I endorse it when I don't. So, no, I'm not going to be your little pet, and I'm not going to do this for you." And Scrimgeour's getting all pissed, and he says, "Dumbledore's man through and through." And Harry's like, "Yeah, I am." And that ends up coming back around. But you can tell that Scrimgeour kind of appreciates that, but it's like, no, the Minister of Magic shows up and is, like, grilling Harry a little bit. But in the movie, we get the whole Burrow burning down, and I really like the symbolism of that, because that really hits the audience in the heart hard, and it shows, like, this is getting really bad. Another thing I really like, that Ginny immediately follows Harry. Also, in Deathly Hallows, when Harry sneaks back into Hogwarts, in the movie, if you notice, the first three people to step in front of Harry to defend him are McGonagall, Hermione, and then Ginny, and it's all three women, and that's how you show women doing things, because ladies can do stuff, but they don't make it force feed you, like, "Oh, look it, we did this," but it's like, no, they would be the first ones to step up, and I like that, but I like that no matter what, Ginny just chases after him at the scene with the Burrow burning down, but it breaks your heart every time you watch it. Now, instead of getting in the book, like, Harry finds out that Crabbe and Goyle have been drinking Polyjuice Potion and keeping lookout for Draco while he's going into the Room of Requirement. Throughout the movie, we actually get to see Draco in the Room of Requirement, and I like that. And they did a very good job showing that without having to force it onto Harry running around the town. You know what I mean? And I like those scenes, and they're very eerie and something that, you know, he thinks he has to do but doesn't want to do. We get way more memories, and in the book, we finally get to Tom Riddle, a little bit older. Harry's at another session with Dumbledore, and they go into a memory. Tom Riddle's a little bit older. He finds out who his dad is. He finds out his family tree, and he's like, really? My mom was a witch, and she couldn't survive death, so I will become immortal. I'll prove that wrong, because whatever. And he finds out his dad is a muggle, and he goes first to the Gaunt house. He figures out his mom's maiden name and goes there. His grandpa's already dead, but he kills his uncle with his uncle's own wand, and then takes that wand and goes up to the Riddle house and kills that whole family with his uncle's wand. That's why he never got pinned for the murders of that, and they blamed Morphin Gaunt, so Voldemort's uncle. And he went to Azkaban for it, even though Voldemort was the one who did it. This is also where he gets the ring. Another quote from the books, when he goes to see the brother, or his uncle. His uncle says, "You look like that muggle. Where's the locket? With my sister who dishonored us, that slut." Oh my God. Rough. The Slughorn memory is done perfect. It's done exactly like the book. And I love it, and I love that they show him in the scene, in the movie, messing with the ring. And that's what I mean. Harry, in the book, starts to notice it way earlier. And in the movie, if you watch, they show it going on a lot. I'm not going to lie, I'm glad that they skipped all the disapparating stuff, but the only reason they do that is to establish you can't disapparate in and out of Hogwarts, and I didn't appreciate that in the movie that they allowed Dumbledore to do that, because they don't allow Dumbledore to do that. But I get it, for the movie's sake, but that's not a thing, and that always irked me. But I was glad that they skipped all the disapparating classes and how old you have to be to do it and all that. I was glad they skipped all that. That I understand you cutting. The only problem with that is where we learn about splinching, and that's what happens to Ron in the next book and movie. And so it's like, if you didn't know that from the book and you just watched Deathly Hallows and you see Ron all jacked up, you wouldn't know what splinching is, but that's where we learn that. Oh, the poisoning. I really enjoyed that. And I think I like the way the movie handled it better with Lavender and Ron breaking up, and when he's saying Hermione in the hospital wing, I liked the way, and Dumbledore has a great quote when he's like, "Oh, the sting of young love," or whatever. It's a great quote, but I like that scene better from how they handle it in the book. But it's not that I don't like it more. It's that, like I said, I like to give credit to things when they're done well, and it's like, and that's not even in the book, and it's done very well. I think that Rupert Grint and Daniel Radcliffe are killing it acting-wise, and I think they do a really good job of that. And I love that whole scene between them, Slughorn and Ron falling out, and it's like, it's genuinely like, oh my God, we're gonna lose him, you know? And Slughorn's genuinely scared. He's like, oh my God, like, what did I do? But they did a really, really good job with that. They let Luna Lovegood do the announcements for the Quidditch. Now, that's the one part of the Quidditch that I wish I would have saw, was Luna doing all the announcements. And Ron is in the hospital from the poisoning, and Harry gets jacked up by one of his teammates who keeps trying to take over. So he's in the hospital, and they're listening to this announcement taking place from Luna, and she's just saying ridiculous things, and it's hilarious. And that's the one thing that I wish I got to see. But, yeah, I love that part in the book. Now, here's where we're just going to talk about all of the rest of the memories in the book, right in a row, where Voldemort asks to teach at Hogwarts as soon as he's out, and the headmaster prior to Dumbledore's like, no, you're too young, go out into the world, and then come back later. Okay. So he goes and he starts to work at Borgin and Burke's, the scary shop that Draco's at, that Harry ends up at in Chamber of Secrets, the one with the creepy hand. Yeah, that's Borgin and Burke's. That's where the initiation of Draco becoming a Death Eater happens. All that. The creepy store. You know what I'm talking about. Voldemort goes and works there, and everybody thought that was weird, because they were like, this guy that was so talented and so great, why is he working there? And it was because he was trying to find these artifacts. So first he finds this old woman who has the Helga Hufflepuff cup. And then she's like, oh yeah, and I have this locket. Now the locket, he's like, no, that belongs to me. At this point, he's still charming, he's still good-looking, he's still attractive, and before he gets there in the memory, it's the memory of a house elf of when Voldemort came over to look at the cup and the locket for the store, and he doesn't know about the locket at first, and he sees the cup, and he's like, oh yeah, and she's like, oh, and I know you appreciate stuff, and she's getting all ready before he gets there, and all this crap, and then he sees the locket, and that's when even Harry notices, and Harry notices in the memory that this old woman is like, whoa, whatever you just did scared me. You know what I mean? Like, she's like a flicker in his eyes of just like hatred, like freaks her out. She gets a bad vibe. He poisons her. The house elf gets blamed. He takes the cup. He takes the locket. So now he's got the locket Horcrux, the cup to make a Horcrux, the diary. These things are all already happening. Oh, and the ring. And I always really liked when they came out, and I wish they would have done that in the movie, but just to show people, like, this is how he was. Like, he was this charming, charismatic guy that, yeah, and that's how he got these specific things, and that's why what Harry says to Dumbledore, it could be anything. It could be a tin can, it could be a boot, and it could be a dirty, mangled boot that we use, blah, blah, blah. It could be a bucket, and Dumbledore's like, no, you're thinking of a port key. He's like, Voldemort is way too full of himself to not use something special, so I don't think he was trying to come and apply to be a teacher. I think he was trying to come and lurk about the school to find stuff. And I think that Godric Gryffindor's sword is safe, but yada, yada, yada. He got the cup and he got the locket. And Harry's like, well, I understand the locket because that was, like, in his family, but why the cup? And that's when he tells him, like, yeah, no, I think he wanted these big, important things because he thinks he's so big and important. One of Dumbledore's memories where Voldemort comes back again asking for a job at Hogwarts. And this is the best. Once again, Dumbledore refuses to allow him to be called Voldemort. He's like, I go by a different name now. He's like, yeah, I heard, but I'm still going to call you Tom in a polite way. And the whole time, Dumbledore is polite shit-talking, and I love it. Now, in this memory, a few years down the line, because he's been making Horcruxes and tearing his soul apart, now he's looking more gaunt and gross, and he's not fully snake-like yet, but he's wearing all black and all this stuff. Oh, that's what happens. He says, they don't call me Tom anymore. And he goes, yeah, but you'll always be Tom to me. It's just a habit of having an old teacher. And Dumbledore's being polite. Dumbledore's like, why do you want to teach here? You can go and do all your other stuff. If what I've been hearing about what you've been doing is true, why don't you get to Steppen? And he's like, why do you do it? You've been offered Minister of Magic twice. And Dumbledore's like, 3 times, actually. And it's because I would rather be here because teaching is more important. And also Voldemort sees how important that is because Dumbledore knows you are going to try and create an army. Now, this is a great quote from Voldemort and a great retort from Dumbledore. Greatness inspires envy, envy engenders spite, spite spawns lies. You must know this, Dumbledore. And Dumbledore says, you call this greatness? And Voldemort pops off about how, oh yeah, love isn't that great. And he says, you know some, but you're ignorant to others. And then he says, love means nothing. I haven't seen it. And then Dumbledore says, you've been looking in the wrong places. Then, still politely, Dumbledore just says, I know that you have all your henchmen right down the road at Hogsmeade. I know you got me surrounded. So why'd you show up here? Why are you here? Is it to ask for a teaching job? Or is it something else? He's like, because Voldemort knows he can't take Dumbledore. That's how bad of a motherfucker Dumbledore is. He can't take him. So he's like, I know you got henchmen down the road. I know this. I know that. And that's when we get the line of, and Voldemort's real pissed about that. He starts getting mad. And he's like, oh, and he goes, nope, I'm just friendly with the local barman. Well, who's a local barman? His brother, Aberforth, and nobody knows it. That is when Dumbledore starts to put together, I think he's in here trying to find other items to make into Horcruxes. He's not really wanting a teaching position. But after that, the position was cursed. That's why nobody stays as... Ever since Voldemort wanted the Defense Against the Dark Arts job and didn't get it, it's been cursed. Quirrell, out. Mad-Eye Moody, wasn't Mad-Eye Moody. Snape, like... It's been cursed ever since Voldemort was like, yeah, okay, fine. If you're not going to let me have it, nobody can have it. I will say this, there's not enough Dobby and Creature stuff going on, and I do know that they show that a few times, but they beat the hell out of each other more than once, and all of that's pretty similar in the movie and the book. The Room of Requirement finding out with Draco, that's pretty much the same, but I do think it's funnier and in the book. But I do think that the Septum Sempra scene with Draco in the movie hits harder than it does in the book. Also looked up the Latin for that, and it means severed continuously. So it's just like constantly, it doesn't stop cutting you up, and it's like, oh, that's rough. Now this is one of my favorite scenes in the entire series, is when Harry takes the Felix Felicis and goes down to the Aragog funeral. And that's in the book, but the funny parts of him catching Slughorn aren't, and I think that is so well done, and I love it. Then they go to Hagrid's hut, and they're getting hammered, and that's all in the book. That's all happening. But the scene where Slughorn starts talking about Harry's mom and the fish, Francis, that's not in the book. And I think that is one of the best scenes in the entire series. They do talk, but it's not like the fish whole thing. And I love that. And he was like, and I knew it. And he's like, be brave like my mother. And then he finally gives up the memory. All Horace's memory does is solidify that, no, Horcruxes are happening. I already thought they were happening, but no, it's happening. Even Harry starts to say, like, I'm sick of this love thing. And he's like, no, you need to understand friendship, love. That's the thing that Voldemort doesn't get, and you do. I don't like the way they handled the Ginny kiss in the Room of Requirement in the movie. I think that's dumb. In the book, they kiss after the Quidditch match, after they win, and I think that, and it's great, and it's awesome. And then it's like, Ron's like, but he accepts it. This is the part where things get real different, that irritate me. And like I said, I think they wanted to focus more on, like, adolescent life, so they kept more of this stuff out. But the scene where Bellatrix blows up the Great Hall that's stupendous. That is so well done, and that's a great imagery to be like, oh my god, not the Great Hall, like, you know what I mean? It's such a special place to us as the audience. So that's not in the book, and that's great, and I love that. But there's a whole war that goes on because Harry gives Ginny, Neville, Ron, all of them, the rest of his Felix Felicis, and says, drink this, I gotta go with Dumbledore, we're gonna go and do something that I'm not supposed to tell you guys about, but I told some of you about, so I gotta go. Dumbledore and Harry dip out. They go to the cave. The cave stuff is almost identical to the book and movie, and that scene in the movie with the music and everything is so well done. I think that Michael Gambon's performance, drinking the potion, is great, and it's like I said, it's almost right out of the book. It's regret, it's all my fault, don't hurt them, I want to die, kill me. We get the Inferi, the Army of the Dead coming up, and like I said, the fire, but I do love the scene in the movie, and it's just so beautifully done. I said in the movie, they apparate from Hogwarts, which wouldn't be a thing. They take brooms they apparate to Hogsmeade, and then they ride brooms to the school because the Dark Mark is above it, and they're panicking. And like I said, there's a whole ass battle. Like in the books, it says like Harry is slipping and his sneakers are so covered in blood, he's falling and stuff like that. It's rough. That's how Bill Weasley gets attacked by a werewolf. And I think I forgot that in the book how quick it happens, but Albus is like, Harry, listen, and then throws the cloak on him, hits him with Petrificus Totalis, and then Draco's there and disarms him. The back and forth between Draco and Albus is great. Between Tom Felton and Michael Gambon is great. That's all really well done. That's essentially the exact same. But like I said, below the tower is a whole ass battle going on. That's why it takes longer for the Death Eaters to get up there. And this is what I mean about this is the coldest shit ever, but being polite. Draco is saying, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And Dumbledore's like, no, you can't. And then he says, no, Draco says to Dumbledore, you are at my mercy. I have the wand. And Dumbledore says, no, you're at my mercy. Like a bad motherfucker. The Death Eaters enter in, and like I said, this is how it's described. How he addresses them, and this is what I mean about the polite shit-talking. As though welcoming them to a tea party. And then one of them says, we're sick of your jokes. And he says, oh, jokes? No, these are manners. I wish they would have put this in, because I love this. And they said, is that Fenrir? And he said, Fenrir says, the werewolf, glad to see me, Dumbledore. He said, I can't say that I am. You're killing without the full moon now. And he says, that shocks you. And he's trying to rile Dumbledore up, and Dumbledore don't get riled up. And he's like, shocks you, that frightens you. And Dumbledore says, well, I cannot pretend it doesn't disgust me and shocks me that Draco would invite you to, of all places where his friends live. And then Draco says, I didn't know he was coming. Like, Draco's scared. Harry is still frozen there this whole time. I still like, it doesn't mean that I don't like the way the movie handled it, because I feel like the movie handled it in a more somber way. I just wish they would have made it more clear that there was a straight up battle taking place below with kids and teachers and Death Eaters. And you have to remember that Harry is completely frozen, and he can still hear the fight going on, and he's terrified for his friends. He's terrified for Dumbledore. He doesn't know what's going on. Snape shows up, and the second Snape shows up, it says, even the werewolf cowered. And it's like, that's how bad of a motherfucker Snape is, too. Snape takes out Dumbledore. The fall is heartbreaking. It's a great scene. I think they do it very well. But then, like I said, now Harry is chasing after Snape and them, gets attacked by Fenrir. Someone gets him out. It's chaos all over Hogwarts. And like I said, in the movie when they show Bellatrix destroy the Great Hall and then light up Hagrid's house does get lit on fire. But like I said, there's a whole ass battle going on. And even Ginny says later on, like, I don't think we would have made it if we didn't have that Felix Felicis. But I really liked in the book, what happens is I love when Snape said, I think that Snape really truly was going to kill Harry right there. When he calls him a coward, and he's like, you dare call me a coward? He's like, your dad wouldn't take me on unless it was 4 verse 1. What was he? And they're going back and forth, and then then Harry tries to use his own spell against him, and he's like, you dare use my own spell against me? Yeah, okay. But then I really truly think that in the book, Snape is really about to take Harry out, and then Buckbeak, the hippogriff, smashes Snape and gets him off of him, or gets him away, and then Snape runs off. But I truly believe that if Buckbeak wouldn't have intervened, Snape would have killed him. Like in my notes, there's 2 bodies on the ground that Harry doesn't know if they're alive or dead. One of them's Neville, Ginny's fighting a Death Eater, McGonagall, Lupin, Ron, Tonks. They're all fighting, and his shoes are so slippery, they're covered in blood. Now, I think that sometimes I have to skip the chapter, or a part of the chapter of when Hagrid finds out that Dumbledore is dead, because it's so heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking in the movie too, but nothing touches it in the book. And let's talk about that too, because right before that, Harry starts using Crucio on an unforgivable curse, which he uses several times, on Snape, and Snape's like, oh no, we're done using that, Potter, and that's when they start doing that. But Hagrid was already getting lit up with spells, but because he's a giant, he was okay. And that pissed Harry off too, and the house is on fire, but he can hear Fang the dog crying while he's fighting with Snape, and that's also bothering Harry. And I'm telling you, this gets me every time, because Hagrid doesn't know Dumbledore's dead yet, and he says, it's nothing that he won't be able to put right about putting the house back together. And Harry's like, he's dead. He's gone. Now, here's a scene that isn't in the books that is absolutely magnificent. Wands up. The wands up, getting rid of the dark mark altogether around Albus's body is not in the book. And it's great. That is a great, amazing scene. Instead, they go to, and Harry finds out about the fake locket before Hermione does. And at the end of the movie, we find that out. And I like the ending in the movie a little bit better, like the final scene better in the movie when we get Fawkes going by, but we don't get Dumbledore's funeral, which we should have gotten, or at least a little bit of, but we're not going to get whatever. We just should have had Dumbledore's funeral because it showed how many people he touched and how many people he helped. But they get Harry straight to the hospital wing where all his friends are, and that's when we get, after Molly and Ginny and Hermione were treating Fleur like shit. I love that line from Fleur when she's like, what, you think I won't love him anymore because he got messed up by a werewolf? You think I won't love him anymore because he's ugly? She's like, I'm good enough looking for the both of us. Step off. And then she takes the ointment from Molly Weasley and starts taking care of Bill, who she's dating, or fiance or whatever, herself. And that's when Molly's finally like, oh, you do care about him. Okay. But that's when they're all in the hospital wing talking, and they're all arguing about it, and he's saying, don't trust Snape. It was Snape, and now everybody's confused, and Lupin's like, we can't have us be divided. We have to stay together. We can't, whatever, like, it is what it is. So we have that, but we also get all talking about how Fawkes's song and the Phoenix song is almost like calming everybody's hearts and stuff, which is absolutely beautiful. And I love that. Like I said, that's why I do love that final shot in the movie of Fawkes going past where Dumbledore fell off the tower with the golden trio and him singing. And it's like, if you're a book reader, yeah. And like I said, I always understand why I have to cut stuff out. And I'm so glad that I did this, and I want to go into more detail about it, but I'm like, I do think that is the biggest thing Half-Blood suffers from, is they said, okay, well, 15, 16-year-olds are the big demographic for this, and what do they care about right now? Oh, we have this people having crushes on each other theme going on, so let's amp more of that up and cut some of this other stuff out, which I don't think they should have, and I think the movie suffers for it, but it's not bad. But like I said, this is just me going like, hey, I think the movie did this really well and better than the book, and I think that the book, of course, is great. But yeah, I'm happy with MOTORCITYNERDS, and thank you so much for saying this, because I really want to do this, and the Deathly Hallow ones, that's going to be a long video, but Half-Blood's pretty much the same, except for a few really big things. And like I said, there's other scenes in it that are really good, but this one's just different from the other ones I've done, because like I said, I do think that they said, let's focus more in on what the audience is also going through in their adolescence. But welcome to the new subscribers. I have other Harry Potter videos up. Check them out. They're not that good, but I'm trying my best. Yeah, subscribe, comment, share. I have Harry Potter themed stuff on my OF. I have Instagram. I have all that. All the descriptions or all the links and stuff are down in the description down below. I've been streaming Kingdom Hearts 3. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do, but we'll see. That, like, even more changes are coming, guys, that I just can't catch a break. But we're not going to complain. We're going to be happy. Oh, yeah, and tell me what house you're in down below.